What's up everyone and welcome back to MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with what's next for Ilia Topuria after UFC 298 win. In the main event of UFC 298, Ilia Topuria picked up the biggest win of his career, extending his unbeaten professional record to 15-0 with a sensational second-round knockout win. In the first, the two fighters exchanged a number of heavy leg kicks, with Volkanovski moving and working the jab, while Topuria seemed to be gauging on the range and speed of the champ. In the second, El Matador made good on his fight week prediction, finishing the champ and capturing UFC gold to usher in a new era at 145 pounds. During his post-fight Octagon interview, Volkanovski referenced the rumored UFC event in Spain this year, suggesting that the two run things back given his lengthy run atop the featherweight division. Had Volkanovski defended his title, he would have entered into a category alongside some of the greatest fighters of all time with 6 title defenses. As the commentary duo of Joe Rogan and Michael Bisping pointed out, given that Volkanovski has been on the receiving end of back-to-back KOs, even though he deserves an immediate rematch, it may be worth taking some time off to recover before jumping back into the swing of things. For his part, Topuria indicated that he wants a fight with Conor McGregor. However, given the fact that the Irish superstar has not competed at 145 pounds since his UFC 194 win over Jose Aldo in 2015, a fight between the two seems unlikely. Next up, let's take a look at Robert Whittaker vs. Paulo Costa recap. In the co-main event of UFC 298, former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker went to war with Paulo Costa. The bout brought the Honda Center to its feet, with both fighters finding success at various points of the bout. Every time it seemed as though one fighter was beginning to gain momentum, the tides turned, with momentum swinging the other way, giving fans a fight for the ages. After 3 hard-fought rounds, Robert Whittaker's hand was raised, returning the former champ to the win column after a loss to Dricus du Plessis last year. Thanks to his pace, toughness, and some brutal low kicks, Robert Whittaker proved that he still has what it takes to compete against the best of the best at 185 pounds. While Whittaker didn't use his time on the mic to call out an opponent, he indicated heading into the fight that he has his sights set on a rematch with Dricus du Plessis. Of course, du Plessis is eager to defend his title against Israel Adesanya, meaning Robert Whittaker will either have to fight in a #1 contender bout or wait until the du Plessis vs. Adesanya fight plays out later this year. Should Whittaker decide to remain active rather than wait for DDP and the last stylebender to square off, the fight most fans want to see is a clash between the Reaper and undefeated contender Khamzat Chimaev, or a bout with former middleweight champion Sean Strickland. Next, let's take a look at what's next for Ian Garry after UFC 298 win. On the main card of UFC 298, Ian Garry extended his unbeaten streak by picking up a win over Jeff Neal. The bout saw both fighters have their moments in a back-and-forth matchup that went to a split decision that saw Garry get his hand raised after going at it with a fan on Friday following the ceremonial weigh-in. On Saturday night in Anaheim, Garry tactically used his reach advantage and footwork to stay on the outside, picking his shots as Neal looked to close the distance and land some big power punches. Interestingly enough, however, much of the fight was contested against the cage in the clinch, where Neal struggled to get shots off despite having an advantageous position in most of the cage clinch exchanges. After the reading of the judges' scorecards, Garry spoke with Joe Rogan inside the octagon, amid a chorus of boos from the crowd in Anaheim, California. As he indicated, much like he stated before the fight, he would like to compete against Colby Covington next. Using his time on the mic, Garry called on Hunter Campbell to book a fight between he and the former interim champ. However, it's unclear whether or not Covington is interested in the fight. After his recent loss to Leon Edwards late last year, Covington called for a fight with Stephen Thompson. However, since then, he's continued to take aim at Ian Garry in the media, potentially setting the stage for a welterweight showdown between two of the biggest trash talkers in the division. Next, let's take a look at UFC reveals huge news for UFC 301. On Saturday, the UFC made a pretty big announcement regarding the UFC 301 card, indicating that the promotion would be heading back to Rio de Janeiro for the upcoming event on May 4th. Tickets for the event are set to go on sale on March 13th, with pre-sale tickets releasing through UFC.com/Rio. The Rio card, which already has a number of announced fights, unsurprisingly features a number of Brazilian standouts. So far, 5 fights have been added to the card, with the most notable being a middleweight contest between Paul Craig and Caio Borralho. In addition, lightweights Joaquim Silva and Drakkar Klose will compete, while in the flyweight division, Alessandro Costa and Kevin Borjas are set to throw down, as well as a featherweight bout between Joe Anderson Brito and Jack Shore, and a women's flyweight bout between Ernesta Caricaita and Dion Barboza. While it's unclear what fight will headline the event, expect a big main event announcement considering this will be the first time the UFC has hosted a pay-per-view in Brazil since the UFC 283 event back in January of 2023. One of the early contenders for a main event headliner is Alexandre Pantoja, who said back in January that he'd like to defend his flyweight title in Brazil, giving the UFC a high-profile potential headliner for this event. Next, let's take a look at what's next for Merab Dvalishvili after UFC 298 win. On the main card of UFC 298, Merab Dvalishvili and Henry Cejudo competed in a bantamweight title eliminator that went the distance. In the first round, Cejudo seemed to come out strong, appearing to land clean on the machine. However, as the fight went on, Dvalishvili continued to get stronger, winning the second and third rounds in dominant fashion. Using his signature pace and his smothering grappling game, Dvalishvili was able to put the pressure on Cejudo, who appeared to possibly be dealing with a broken left arm in the later stages of the fight. When the scorecards were read, Dvalishvili's hand was raised, cementing his status as the #1 contender. Following the upcoming Sean O'Malley vs. Chito Vera fight at UFC 299, Dvalishvili will have a chance to face the winner. The date for Dvalishvili's title shot, of course, will be determined, by how much damage the winner of the O'Malley vs. Vera fight takes. However, the hope seems to be that the bout winds up taking place late summer or early fall. In the case of Henry Cejudo, the former Olympian indicated heading into the fight that his sights were still set on pursuing gold at bantamweight and eventually featherweight. However, as he indicated, with the loss to Dvalishvili, he planned to retire. Although Triple C did not have the opportunity to speak with Joe Rogan inside the cage after the fight, the expectation is that he will ride off into the sunset, bringing an end to his storied career that sees him considered as one of the most decorated combat sports athletes of all time. Next up, let's take a look at Joe Rogan reacts to Sean Strickland's sparring footage. Former UFC middleweight champion Sean Strickland recently made headlines leading up to the Super Bowl for sparring a content creator by the name of Sneako. The two linked up at the UFC PI for a sparring session that saw Strickland allow the creator to get some punches off before then kicking it into high gear late in the session, landing a barrage of strikes that left Sneako bloody. The combat sports community was quick to react, with many of the mindset that Strickland had no business unloading on the creator. However, the former champ and a number of other fans didn't see an issue with the sparring session, chalking the result up to Sneako biting off more than he can chew. During a recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, the longtime UFC commentator weighed in on the issue.
Well, he beat up that kid who's a smaller than him streamer named Sneako, which is not a good look. He beat the shit out of that guy.
Yeah.
I just don't know why he wanted to do that. It's so easy for him to beat that guy up. That's not fair. It's not really. The kid, I don't know what that kid thought. First of all, he's so silly for doing that, for agreeing to do that with Sean Strickland. But Sean Strickland's a different animal. Sean Strickland has, he's got this man code, and he believes in it. Like, you got to get your ass kicked every now and then. He spars all the time.
As Strickland has shown in the past, if there's one thing he loves, it's fighting and sparring, whether it's in front of an arena full of fans or whether it's simply at the gym. The MMA community goes off on Joe Rogan for UFC 298. Fans have been calling Joe Rogan biased after his commentary work at UFC 298, claiming that he only focuses on certain things and doesn't provide the full aspect of the fights. Here's what the community had to say to Rogan. Ian Garry hits Jeff Neal's guard forearm with a knee, then whiffs 2 punches. Joe Rogan. Oh, vicious combination from Garry. I'm telling you, man, you're talking about world-class kickboxing. Elite of the elite. Somebody get this blind closeted gay dude off the desk. I liked when Ian was very obviously running and he called it excellent footwork. Been saying this for years. He does it knowing fine well judges can hear the crap he spews. A lot of the commentators have bias. DC loves talking about guys who wrestle and grapple in general, and Joe loves kicks. Anik is probably the only one who doesn't express a lot of bias. These guys just enjoy certain things, and those leg kicks do affect how fighters perform. It's something to note that gets overlooked by most. Facts. He sounded like he was going to jump in the cage and 2v1 Jeff Neal with Ian Garry. During Volk vs. Topuria, he initially said, Volk is moving straight backwards to avoid taking shots, which isn't ideal. And a couple seconds later, he switched to, since the start of the fight, Volk is moving back at an angle to avoid the shots. Literal contradiction. Top comments. Remember when Patty wanted a piece of Ilia? LOL. Merab carried Henry across the ring. That's an old school DC move 3. It's what Henry deserves after embarrassing his coach. Totally crushed. Volk lost. Hopefully, he can bounce back. Thank God for Whittaker, cause I can only take so much. I can't believe Whittaker Costa didn't get Fight of the Night, shaking my head. They deserve a huge bonus. Shame on the UFC. Make sure to leave a comment and you might get featured in our next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss any MMA news. Check out our video from yesterday if you missed it. See you tomorrow.